the aliens reached Earth. Then humanity sent one message: turn back now. The fleet of the Vhorenn Ascendancy dropped out of slip space 11 light minutes from Earth, and for 3 full seconds, nothing happened. Then every screen on all 9 command ships lit up with the same message, translated instantly into perfect Vhorenn script: turn back now. No demands, no greeting, no explanation. Fleet Marshal Ssirath stared at the words until they blurred. In 400 years of Vhorenn expansion, no species had ever spoken to them before firing a single shot. Species begged. Species screamed. Species sent their scientists to negotiate, their priests to plead, their children to weep on camera for mercy. This species sent 2 words and fell silent. Discipline unlike anything in our records. Ssirath murmured, or something that isn't afraid of us at all. She had no idea, in that moment, how right the second guess was, or how much that fear would cost her people before the day ended. But none of this had begun with a warning. It had begun 3 weeks earlier, in a silence that terrified Earth far more than any invasion ever could. Ssirath had grown up on stories of conquest told at her mother's knee. Tales of proud species who wept and begged and finally knelt. She had expected tears. She had expected pleading transmissions flooding every frequency, desperate offers of surrender before a single ship had even entered weapons range. Instead there was nothing but that single sentence, repeating on a loop, calm as a closing door. She ordered a full sensor sweep of the system. 9 planets, 1 modest yellow star and a third world glowing faintly blue-green under a thin veil of atmosphere. No visible fleet, no orbital defense platforms bristling with weapons. Nothing that should have justified that kind of confidence. Marshal, Kest said carefully. Should we treat the message as a threat or as theater? I don't know yet, Ssirath admitted, and hated how unfamiliar those words felt in her own mouth. But I intend to find out before I decide how many of our people die learning it the hard way. 3 weeks earlier, Dr. Amara Okoye had spent 11 years listening to the sky. She ran the Deep Space Monitoring Station outside Nairobi, a career built on patience and static, and she had never once expected the sky to answer back. The signal arrived at 3:14 a.m. local time, not a message, but a presence. A gravitational ripple too clean to be natural, moving at a fraction of light speed, aimed directly at Sol. Within 6 hours, every space agency on Earth confirmed the same reading. Something enormous was coming, and it wasn't slowing down to say hello first. The world didn't panic. That was the part historians would never quite believe. Governments that hadn't spoken civilly in a generation opened a single shared channel within 48 hours. Not out of unity born from friendship, but because every leader on the planet understood the same brutal arithmetic. Whatever was coming didn't care about borders. General Marcus Reyes, commanding the newly unified Earth Defense Coalition, stood before that channel and said the only thing that mattered. We don't know if they're hostile, we prepare like they are, we don't fire first, we don't grovel either. No one in that room realized how literally he meant both. Promise thee. The Vhorenn fleet took 19 days to arrive, and Earth spent every one of them building, not weapons, though those were built too, in silence, underground, out of sight. Earth spent those days building *Ineas Prometheus a ship humanity had been secretly assembling in the shadow of the moon for 6 years, ever since the first unexplained deep space anomaly had been detected near Neptune. Officially, no such ship existed. Unofficially, it was humanity's answer to a question nobody had dared ask aloud. What happens if we're not alone, and they're not friendly? Prometheus was not elegant. It was not beautiful. It was 3 kilometers of layered armor, split-core reactors, and enough firepower to level a continent, built by a species that had spent its entire history fighting itself and had, somewhere, along the way, gotten terrifyingly good at it. It had never fired a shot outside a testing range. No one, not even its own crew, knew for certain if it would hold together in real combat. That uncertainty was about to become the most important secret in human history. First contact. When the Vhorenn fleet arrived, Earth showed them exactly one thing: an old model communications satellite, broadcasting the 2-word message, on loop, in perfect Vhorenn. Ssirath found that almost more unsettling than a show of force. a species advanced enough to translate a language they'd never encountered, delivered with zero accompanying military presence, was either monumentally stupid or supremely confident. Her science officer, a nervous young Vhorenn named Kest, offered the obvious theory. Perhaps they have no fleet at all. Perhaps this is a bluff. Perhaps, Ssirath agreed. Send the Ashanvel forward. If it's a bluff, we'll know within the hour. The council back home had made the exact same assumption 2 centuries earlier about another species. That species no longer existed. No one on the bridge remembered the history well enough to see the pattern repeating. The Ashanvel, a single scout cruiser, broke formation and moved toward Earth's orbital defense line. It never reached it. At 400,000 kilometers out, space itself seemed to fold. Something vast slid out of a stealth field that Vhorenn sensors had never even theorized was possible. 3 kilometers of dark hull, running silent, running dark, and running directly into intercept range before anyone on the Ashanvel had time to scream a warning. Prometheus didn't fire. It didn't need to. It simply appeared. Close enough to read the paint scratches on the scout ship's hull, and held position. The message that followed wasn't sent in Vhorenn script this time. It didn't need translation. Silence, pure, deliberate, unbearable silence. Aboard the Ashanvel, panic did what panic always does. It spread faster than orders could contain it. Junior officers screamed for retreat. Weapons crews begged for permission to fire. The captain, a proud old warrior named Dorun Kess, who had commanded ships through 6 border conflicts, felt something he hadn't felt since his first battle. The ice-cold certainty that he was completely outmatched, and that his enemy hadn't even bothered to prove it yet. "Hold," he ordered, voice shaking despite himself. "Hold position. Do not provoke it." But someone on that bridge had already decided fear was worse than death. A young weapons officer, barely out of training, broke discipline and fired a single plasma round. Not at Prometheus, but in blind panic, clipping the edge of its outer hull plating. It was a scratch. Nothing more. Prometheus responded in less than 2 seconds. Not with a devastating counterstrike, but with something far more chilling. Every weapons system aboard the Ashanvel went dark simultaneously, overridden and locked by a countermeasure system no Vhorenn engineer could later explain. The ship was left drifting, powerless, completely at the mercy of a vessel that had just demonstrated it could disable an entire warship without firing a single shot in anger. Then Prometheus spoke, not to threaten, but to explain. "Your ship fired on us. We have neutralized the threat, not your crew. No lives were taken. This was your only warning. There will not be a second." Back on the Vhorenn flagship, Ssirath Vel watched the sensor logs in stunned silence. 400 years of conquest had taught her people exactly one lesson about every species they'd ever encountered. Overwhelming force ended arguments quickly. Fear made enemies compliant. This species had disabled an armed warship, without killing a single crew member, had explained itself afterward like a parent, scolding a child, rather than a predator, savoring a kill. That wasn't mercy, that was something far more dangerous, control. "Marshal," Kest said quietly, "our entire strategic doctrine assumes every species eventually breaks under pressure. What if this one doesn't have a breaking point?" Ssirath didn't answer immediately. She was remembering her own final words before the fleet departed home space. A promise to the Ascendancy Council, that this campaign would be swift, decisive, another quiet chapter in an empire that had never lost a first contact war. She was beginning to understand she might have made a promise she couldn't keep. 2 hours later, against every instinct in 4 centuries of Vhorenn military doctrine, Ssirath Vel did something no fleet marshal had done in living memory. She requested a diplomatic channel. General Reyes answered personally, flanked by Dr. Okoye and a small circle of advisors, none of them in uniform, none of them performing strength they didn't feel. Reyes had learned that lesson from his own military career. The moment you have to perform confidence, you've already lost the room. "You could have destroyed the Ashanvel," Ssirath said, testing. "Why show restraint? Because you didn't come here to destroy us," Reyes replied. "You came to test us. There's a difference. We answered the test. We didn't need to win the war to make our point." The truth stunned the entire Vhorenn command staff. Ssirath studied the human on her screen for a long moment. Every prior first contact scenario in Vhorenn history had ended one of two ways: total surrender, or total war. No species had ever offered a third option, proof of strength, followed immediately by an open hand. "What do you want?" she asked, "in exchange for our fleet's safe withdrawal?" Reyes's answer surprised even his own advisors. "Nothing. Turn back. Tell your ascendancy what you saw here. We're not interested in your territory, and we're not going to beg for peace we've already secured through restraint. But if another fleet comes back with worse intentions than curiosity—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Every Vhorenn on that bridge understood exactly what he meant, and for the first time in 400 years, an entire fleet felt something their doctrine had never prepared them for. Respect tangled inseparably with fear. Turning point. Ssirath Vel gave the order that night. Full withdrawal, no further contact, no aggressive posturing. Her officers were stunned, some quietly furious. An empire built on conquest did not simply leave, but Ssirath had commanded enough campaigns to recognize a battle already lost before it started. And this one had been lost the moment Prometheus decloaked without firing a shot. Not because the humans were unbeatable. She doubted that. Every species had a breaking point, somewhere, but she had glimpsed something in that human commander's voice that made her recalculate everything. They hadn't been trying to win a war. They'd been trying to avoid one, and they'd proven, in a single afternoon, that they could do both if forced to choose. Her first office officer argued the point for nearly an hour before she silenced him. Not with rank, though she could have, but with a single question he couldn't answer. "Tell me," she said, "how many ships you're willing to lose, confirming what I already know." He had no number to give her. No one ever did. When the cost was real instead of theoretical. Word of the withdrawal spread through the fleet within minutes, and with it came something Ssirath hadn't anticipated: relief. Not shame, not mutiny, but quiet, exhausted relief from crews who had spent 19 days preparing to die for a campaign none of them fully understood. She realized then that fear of the unknown had been driving her officers as much as any doctrine ever had. And that the humans, in their strange restrained way, had simply refused to feed that fear any further fuel. As the Vhorenn fleet folded back into slip space, Ssirath filed the only report of her career that ended not with a declaration of victory, but with a single recommendation to the Ascendancy Council, one that would ripple through Vhorenn's strategic doctrine for a generation: do not return to the third planet of the Sol system unless prepared to be met as equals. They are not weak, they are patient, and patience, in a species with power to match ours, is the most dangerous quality imaginable. Epilogue. 6 months later, Dr. Amara Okoye stood on the observation deck of Prometheus, watching Earth turn slowly beneath her, blue and impossibly fragile against the dark. General Reyes joined her in silence before finally speaking. "You think they'll come back?" "Eventually," Amara said. "Someone always does. But we bought ourselves time. Time to grow, time to decide who we want to be before someone else decides it for us." Reyes nodded slowly, watching the planet turn. "2 words," he said. "That's all it took to change everything." Amara smiled, faint and tired and proud all at once. "No," she said. "It wasn't the words that changed anything, it was the fact that we meant them." Below them, Earth kept turning, quieter now, changed forever, but still, impossibly, whole.